Welcome to Talking Ted. This week we talk about episode 7, He's Gotta Have It, the final episode of Ted season 1. You know, the one where Johnny can't unhook a bra to save his life. I'm Jessica Lynn Verdi.
And I'm Mike Richards. Before we welcome our guest, Seth MacFarlane, here's Jessica with the recap.
We are quickly set up for the A plot when Johnny realizes he's probably the only student at school that's still a virgin. This is a case that only a talking teddy bear best friend wearing a bra can help to solve. Ted thinks that getting Johnny to act like a guy who definitely has had sex and with a lot of women is the surefire way to lure a lover, while Blair thinks honesty is the way to go, but who are you going to believe? Ted acquires weed from butter name Sheila Borgwat for the first and last time. Johnny runs into her sister, Bethany, who he goes to school with. After a selfless act of heroism, Bethany expresses interest in Johnny, and it's straight to the magic carpet ride, if you know what I mean. No, really, a magic carpet ride where a carpet's strapped to the top of the car and Ted's driving, which lands them in the hospital, but also lands Johnny a date to the prom. Despite Bethany really clicking with Johnny over none other than the best worst movie ever, Flash, he overshoots his mark by claiming to be a stud. The next day, Bethany calls Johnny to end things because he's too experienced for her and she's intimidated by him. Johnny decides not to go to the prom after being rejected, and it isn't until Maddie's sweet but failed attempt to be a loving dad inspires him to go, actually, along with Ted and Blair, who go together. Intent on making things right with Bethany, Johnny takes the mic from the DJ, who will only relinquish it for true love in order to tell the whole student body that he is a virgin and that other fellow virgins should unite and raise their hand, which obviously none do. But the act of social heroism inspires Bethany to confess that she too is a virgin, which I don't understand why she didn't raise her hand when he was doing the act of true love. Anyway, she's ready to hand over his V-card to him tonight.
You know, it took him a moment to get to honesty with her. It took her a moment to get to honesty with him.
That's fair. Despite being unable to unhook a bra, things are going pretty well for Johnny and Bethany. That is, until a news broadcast interrupts them. And it's OJ attempting to flee the cops, which totally means he's guilty, right? Maybe next season, buddy.
So, when does it ever fail to go over to, your girlfriend's house at night, stand outside their window and profess your true love, maybe with a boombox over your head or something like that, playing some, Peter Gabriel. That never fails.
I have to imagine the dad got to him first before, you know what I mean? It's like, because the dad had to call the cops before the girl even heard the boombox.
I love that they did that whole scene without showing the scene, that everybody knows what it was. Everybody can relate to it. Everybody remembers it. And if you can't, I just feel bad for you.
Totally. I actually got to see Peter Gabriel recently.
Oh, no
and
way.
That's all anyone wanted was In Your Eyes. And funnily enough, the movie Say Anything, I believe.
Correct.
That's not the original song that was used to record that scene. And then they ended up superimposing In Your Eyes. And it's just iconic. I can tell you, though, honestly, I think I'd be creeped out if a guy did that. I really would be.
Be a little much, right? Like there's things that's sort of not especially in this case where they've been on one date that ended horrifically, being having medical attention administered by Dr. Tuvok, but.
Hey, that was a good pull. That's if you want. What a fun cameo for that actor.
It was, and it's the second time that I've seen him in the last number of years. First one was in the episode "Lasting Impressions" of the Orville, where we were initially introduced to Laura via the time capsule, and he was the keeper of the time capsule.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and he was the one that deciphered the meaning behind the text messages. Remember when he said WTF is clearly an abbreviation for wireless telecommunication facility.
That episode, actually, just to jump the shark and talk about our other series, Mission Log the Orville, that episode really made me think about how hard it is to interpret something even 100 years from now. Because it's just a few hundred years in the future of the Orville set. And It kind of makes sense that they don't really know how we use telephones and cell phones.
That's true. But just look at the trouble we have texting today. You know, you and I were chatting about the Key and Peele skit.
Oh,
the bit
totally.
they did where one guy couldn't have been nicer. Hey, I'll see you later. I'll see you later. What?
What the heck?
Guy shows up at a bar with a board with a nail in it.
Well, also try telling Gen Z about T9 texting on
that
a
was
Nokia
lovely.
phone.
Yeah.
That was 10 years ago, or 15, maybe 20.
Yeah.
But like that is gone from the radar. Like it was a huge plot point in that other Boston-centric movie where Matt Damon, Leo, and Mark Wahlberg are in.
Mm-hmm.
What is it? The Departed.
Right.
Like he gets his life-saving situation using T9. Anyway, it's times change. How long was 1993 from today? Is it 20, 30?
31 years.
I didn't put that math together while we've been doing this entire show. It's been a minute. Wow. You know, I love a good drink to
Speaking of the early 90s.
numb those feelings.
So I feel like since there was no disclaimer of, hey kids, don't try this magic carpet ride at home. These are specially trained actors in a controlled environment. Then maybe this was actually a thing happening in the early 90s that people were doing this in the wake of the success that was the Disney classic Aladdin.
Yeah, I hadn't considered that because, again, at this stage, I'm about 1993.
Yeah.
Or something. So I'm not considering. I do think I had a Jasmine costume. I think that happened.
Well, we'll just put it out there. If you're thinking about trying to do the magic carpet ride date, don't, can't end well.
Although I think Tuvok saying that it's the dog, like, you know, the way, how pissed Tuvok is, though.
Goddamn
convinced,
movie.
You know what I mean? I feel like that's enough of a PSA. This whole series, the Ted movies, they're the PSA of what not to do. I think that's fair to say, right?
Yeah,
except for, like, loving people.
And I love, you know, Blair's sane person reaction to everything Ted or Johnny say and or do, where Johnny goes, I think I'm going to go with Ted on this one. And she's like, oh, those are the worst words ever spoken.
Totally. And you know, at this point, especially 7 episodes in, she's right. But I think that's what I love about Ted and Johnny's relationship is that they're just in it together. And, you know, there's no ditching each other in the shit. You know what I mean? Like, they obviously have emotional growth and issues and things that get mad at each other, but like Ted's on board.
But they're in it. Yeah,
they're
in it together, and they got to get through it together, and that's what.
I just fucking love that, Mike. I just do.
I do too. You know what else I loved as a kid on Long Island with when people would dump trash in the woods. Man, depending on if they ever dumped an old refrigerator out there, or a car, or some furniture, or anything like that. Man, that was. We had a lot of fun playing with that stuff.
What is horrifying is when Maddie says we're going to dump it in the woods and maybe some kids can play in it. We know that didn't end well for some kids. So we also have to make a PSA, don't play in a refrigerator.
Yeah, don't play in the refrigerator. But, you know, when I was a kid playing in the meadows, in the fields with random stuff.
Is this actually an experience of yours?
Oh yeah, no, that hit home. That line was a home run.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Wow. That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, I just don't have the experience of having woods in your backyard. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, from where I am, woods were not an experience. The only we had nature, but you had to drive to it in LA. So this is. I don't know that I would have survived, Mike. I really don't.
I'm surprised I did.
As our East Coast resident, I think it's time to welcome our other New England resident to our show. What do you say we invite Seth MacFarlane to talk about episode 7, He's Gotta Have It, of Ted?
I think that sounds great, Jess. I'll see you on the other side.
Cheers.
Hey folks, we're here to talk to you about Bear Fight Whiskey, how much we've been enjoying it, and how you can enjoy it yourselves.
I'm a whiskey drinker through and through, and I think I have found my new favorite go-to in Bear Fight Whiskey. It's a little bit of scotch, it's a little bit of bourbon, it's a little bit of grape, and we want to extend a discount to you so you can sip right along with us.
Bear Fight Whiskey is an American single malt. It's one of the most awarded single malt whiskeys in the U.S. It's a simple recipe, it's a fantastic flavor, and it goes great with anything.
So head over to bearfightwhiskey.com, type in BF20 at checkout, and get yourself $20 off of shipping.
And now, back to the show.
Welcome back. We're on the second half of our show, and we're here to wrap up Ted. And who better to talk about it than the man himself, Seth MacFarlane. Welcome back to Talking Ted.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
So by this point, we have covered all the episodes of the series, and we're at the season finale, which, for all understandable reasons, is way too short. We could have watched 10 more episodes of this bear doing fun stuff.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I'm telling you, and it's a great rewatch too. But we're here, and it makes sense. All of a sudden, now we're at like summer's about to happen, and we're worried about a junior in high school losing his virginity, and that's pretty fun. I felt like an odd voyeur, if that makes sense.
Yes, yeah. There was the whole idea going into the first season was like it's just a lot of firsts.
Oh,
It's like a lot of firsts for, whether it's your first bully or you're watching your first dirty movie, you're smoking your first bowl, your first encounter with sex. It's like it was a lot of like, those kinds of things.
That makes a lot of sense. And you know what is nice about it though? It's not so overt that it bonks you on the head, but you still feel like you're genuinely watching a kid who brings his teddy bear to school going through some stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, just kind of skims through junior year and hits all those high points. Any regrets that we don't make 26 episode seasons anymore, or even 22?
It's so much work to animate this bear that I have no regrets that it's only 8. It was a 7 or 8. I guess
It's 7. It's 7.
Yeah. The first one was a the length of 2 episodes. So
okay.
We think of it as originally it was 8, and then the pilot just seemed like it wanted a little more time, so we just kind of supersized that one. But yeah, I certainly do miss that. There is value in the 22 episode format, the 18 episode format, and obviously Family Guy still does it. But there's a lot of disagreement among the brass about the value of it, and will people sit still for that many episodes? With Ted, it's a practical thing of the cost of the bear would make your jaw drop. It's just way too expensive to do for more than even 8 is just pushing it. But
what was the impetus ultimately to go, you know what, this does feel right for Ted to make him into a series? Because this doesn't feel like a cash grab like other places that are trying to make a prequel or a sequel.
Yeah, I mean, it oddly enough was not my idea. My boss at the time, Susan Rovner, who was running Peacock, came to me with the idea of doing a TED series, and it's not something that ever occurred to me. But I had just signed with them, and they were excited about it. And I said, well, let me think about this. And wanted to, if I did it, I wanted to do something that felt like its own thing, that just didn't feel like a reboot or didn't feel like a something that was a cash grab. And this idea of doing it as a prequel set in the 90s and creating this whole new cast. I mean, first of all, we didn't have Wahlberg, so you really can't do anything but a prequel.
Right.
But that was interesting because you can it's only 2 movies, so you can kind of start from scratch and create an ensemble of characters. And I had produced sitcoms before, but I had never really written or been hands-on with the production of a live-action sitcom, and it was kind of interesting. It was fun to do.
So the prequel decision was made, and I imagine it was just sort of backing up 20 years from the first movie. But what does that period of time mean? Because we've talked to actors from the show, some of them who were self-aware in 1993, others who were not. And what does that period of time mean to you?
It's kind of an odd. We didn't want John to be too young or too old. Like, we had to hit this kind of sweet spot where you could tell stories where he was, as you say, self-aware enough and independent enough to kind of have some agency over his life, but still kind of be, at the mercy of the adult world. So the 90s are like, for me, it's kind of an odd pocket. Like, the 80s were much more my, decade, and they're also they're easier to parody. Like, there's stuff in the 80s that's so absurd, and the 90s, as absurd as it is, it's still kind of, we're not that far removed from it that we can't kind of find some connectivity. Whereas the 80s now just feels almost alien.
Well, and that's why it sounds like, just with you saying that, you need a Blair who's like, you can't really say that anymore. You know, like just
Yeah.
kind of bring it back down to that makes a lot of sense,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, I mean that part of it was exciting to, because I love All in the Family. I've always loved All in the Family. I Norman Lear was a good friend, and to kind of use that as a template was exciting, and there was an aspect of that I thought, okay, well, this is going to be, there's a way to do this in the 90s that's maybe a little bit more a little safer, because it's it's like you're dealing with a world that hadn't lost its mind yet completely.
Sure. But you see, so just jumping off the word safe, you know how to target everybody and nobody at the same time. And in a world that's so conscious of being PC, how do you think your comedy skates by? Because it does not leave anybody unmarked, really.
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak for. I'm so put it this way. I think I've gotten better at that. I think there are things early on in Family Guy that I will defend to this day, and other things that I'm like, yeah, I can't really back that one up.
Sure.
But a lot of it, I can say, look, here was the joke. Here's what we're making fun of. And if you watch, a masterpiece like All in the Family, which did it better than anybody, I mean, there are things that you hear on that show you could never even do on television today, but their point was being made really well, and
right.
and as writers, they were really doing their jobs. So, I mean, look, I think part of it is that we're led to believe by a lot of screaming headlines and clickbait that people are way more easily offended than they are. I really don't think that's true. I've seen no evidence in my day-to-day life, in my encounters with viewers and fans, that it's really all that, different. I think our perception of the way society works and the way our culture works and injustices, I think that's changed in a big way. But I don't think that, I think people are really much more able to make the distinction between, something that you would not laugh at in real life, but in a comedy, you have permission. And I don't think that's changed as much as the clickbait would lead us to believe. And so it's just not that different.
What I find so loving, and actually like the heart of the show, is how much Ted and John are there for each other and are gonna back each other up. And yes, the family aspect of it all too, but they're just best friends. But did he make a best friend, or did he just so happen to make a best friend come to life?
I think part of it is just the reality of, like, in a small town, your best friend is just who you happen to be standing next to.
Sure.
There aren't that many people. And I grew up in a town with like 600, 800 people. And it's just,
I didn't realize it was that small. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's, these are the people that you're with. And so you're going to hang out with them. And I mean, the thinking with Ted was that, in the movie, we showed when he came to life, he had a child's voice. And then, the thinking being, like, as he grew up, he was susceptible to the absorption of all the same Boston bullshit that, anyone else was, that my family was. And so, that was kind of the thing. Like, well, Ted was in Boston. He grew up in Boston, and so did John. So they're going to kind of sound the same. And, they're exposed to the same region. So we in many ways, we tried to treat Ted as, once again, as human as we can make him, other than the fact that he looks like a bear.
Sure.
Just all the experience of, like, being the I don't want to say jaded, but I'll say experienced, child star that, went out to Hollywood, was in movies, almost got to be in a space movie, I think, was it Carl Weathers?
No,
Sylvester Stallone. That's what it was. So yeah. He brings all that real life experience back to Johnny. And that helps quite a bit. And what I love about this group, these two, is that they are in it together, man.
Yeah,
when they go into something, they support each other. And when last we talked, I think you cautioned the fans that you might, or the Orville fans, that you might not see the kind of, social fabric woven into the show and social issues. But I tell you what, at the end of the day, these guys tend to get there. They tend to get to where they do the right thing. Like in the episode we're talking about today, lying is bad. Honesty is the best policy. right? Get together with Brittany and tell her the truth.
Don't sleep
Even
with a
at
bunch of girls.
even at great personal cost, right? Hold the boombox up, come back in the car, go to the prom, get embarrassed in front of everybody. But at the end of the day, you get the girl for a good 5 minutes until OJ gets arrested.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's just, that's just avoiding character assassination. You want at the end of the day.
Oh,
it
totally.
does buy you a lot. Like it's. I mean, you look at it was always so important to Jackie Gleason on The Honeymooners that at the end of the day, they ended on a good note. And at times it was absurd. It's like, well, you just yelled at her and then you're going, baby, you're the greatest. And it's just, there's no transition. But the feeling was that we just got to make sure that, it ends on a loving note. And certainly with Ted and John, yeah, they're these complete ups that are just kind of useless. But at the end of the day, yeah, they do need to kind of be ethically responsible.
Yeah, and they wrote 2 great songs, right? You got the Monster Mash, the song, not the Monster Mash, the dance, or
Yes.
the Monster Mash, the song about the dance, about the song. You got that, and then you got F.U. Thunder, right?
Yep.
Comes right at the very end.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was very fun getting to see throughout the series. Just the tiny amounts that you kind of remember. We're going to talk about Flash, and like there's just the fun touchstones you use that tie it back to the movie, but not in an overt way. But so it was kind of nice to see them writing the Thunder Buddy song at the end of this episode, all those things. So I think you really towed the line just right.
Yeah. You don't want it to be a cover band version of the movies. It has to be its own thing. So we did try to adhere to that.
Pressure to for Max, who plays, the future, the baby Wahlberg, and rises to that challenge perfectly. But I have to imagine that's under your direction, also giving him the freedom to be the character he's going to be.
Yes and no. I mean, I'm one of those directors that I love it when an actor comes in already kind of having figured it out.
Sure.
Just because it means the day is shorter, you get out earlier, and you can, the time that you do have, you get a lot more done because you're not struggling, or trying to roll a boulder up a hill. And Max is a great example of that. I mean, we had some terrific auditions, but there was just no contest. I mean, he had already done the work. He had already figured it out. His audition was basically what you saw on screen for the series. I mean, he had done it. So I wish I could take credit, but that's an actor knowing their craft.
Well, and we love how you love to work with people that you've and you've helped nurture their relationship. So it's also cool to see you let them shine.
One more question I got to ask you though before we go. Much like Ralph Cramden and Alice, played by the wonderful Audrey Meadows, are we seeing a future between Brittany and Johnny, or is she just going to get wrecked in Italy?
Bethany?
Yeah.
between Bethany and Dennis the truck.
No, he's too gay for her.
No, yeah, that wouldn't work. Yeah, we will see. I probably not. There's probably the idea that John, graduates high school never having lost his virginity is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of real, isn't it?
That makes so much sense. Because especially, why I like that is he is a late bloomer. Because we got Max, who is so comfortable in his skin. And then you end up as a Wahlberg who, Mark Wahlberg being the only attractive man, as you guys talk about in the movies, right? He's got to go from A to Z. So I think him having a really rough go in high school feels right to me.
Yeah, I mean, that was the big one that we were hoping people would buy, that Wahlberg, who's Wahlberg in the movies,
right.
But his character is still, John Bennett in the movies is still kind of a loser.
Right.
And so, hopefully the audience will make the buy that the confidence and the
the sexiness,
the sense of self that,
yes.
that he has as an adult is in there and it's coming. But that initially it's and we did begin the movie with that same idea, is that he was ostracized. He was left out of, all the fun by the other kids. So it kind of fits that would continue through high school.
I think it's like the perfect glow up, and I think you really are paving the path perfectly for that.
Seth, thank you so much for joining us again, man. This has been awesome. Really looking forward to more great things from you in the future. I know there's things you can and can't talk about. So I think you talked about everything you can talk about, and we'll leave it at that. But thank you so much. And you can all join us next week for one more episode this season as we wrap up our thoughts on Ted Season 1 with a special announcement. See you next week.
Thanks, you guys.
Talking Ted is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment, executive producer Rod Roddenberry and John Champion. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is podcasts.roddenberry.com.